Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Vagabond Dog Industry Chats. This week's guest, Kay Purcell, storied community manager, currently working with Avalanche. How are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Doing well, and I need to point out Avalanche Studios group because there's another Avalanche that makes games that we don't speak of.
Oh, okay. See, these are the technicalities of the corporate world that I'm not particularly familiar with. But I mean, I think everybody kind of has a vague notion of what a community manager is/does, and I have a feeling that vague notion might not entirely be accurate. So I guess in your best terms, can you summarize your professional existence for us?
I will be happy to try. So community management really is kind of the wild, wild west right now.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone kind of understands that they need one. They don't really understand what community managers do.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily understand why they need one or why they should pay good money to have one. Because to a lot of people, they think that community management is shit posting on Reddit.
Right.
And sometimes that's not wrong. Sometimes it's a social media manager. Those are actually not the same thing. Not
Okay.
anymore, anyway. Just to tell you how confusing this is, so I have been a community manager for over 15 years. When I started, my competition in the social media space was MySpace. Facebook didn't even exist yet.
Right.
When I was interviewing, I've interviewed for a couple spans, twice in the last 4 years. I literally would start the conversation by what is community management at your company?
Okay.
Because it really varies that much between companies, even within AAA. So one aspect of it, often, especially in indie, is social media management, which, you're creating graphics to put up on social media, you're tweeting, you're replying to people. Sometimes you do some customer servicey stuff through usually Twitter. No gaming company has really cracked Instagram yet, though a lot of people kind of mess around in there. TikTok's become a really big platform. I don't understand TikTok. I've been doing this too long. I don't get it. That's one big aspect of it, and it's very important. And usually, especially if you're smaller and indie, your community manager is also going to be your social media manager. But don't assume that one person can do both, because it's actually two separate things.
Right.
Community managers actually manage your community and are often in charge of working with, at larger companies, usually working with a data scientist to take the information, take the feels about your game and convert them into numbers.
Okay.
Measurable data. So community managers, we often maintain knowledge bases and update those as we need to. We do more customer service often, though, again, customer service is often its own thing. Sometimes it's both. You can see why this is a confusing topic.
No, I'm kind of following. I had a job a long time ago, like a temp job doing grunt work, basically going through forum posts and seeing sentiment about a game and throwing it in a spreadsheet. So I was working for a community manager then.
That's a little bit of, that's one element of it. That's what I'm saying is community management can be so many things that it's hard to say it's this, because then someone will say, but this is community management.
Right,
It's well, yes, that's also part of it. A lot of what I do is I almost call them I call them sanity checks or gut checks, right?
Okay.
Of hey, we're seeing a lot of people that are really mad about this update, this patch, and everyone hates it. Does everyone hate it, or is it 5 people who were really, really loud? Part of my job is to be able to know the community enough to be able to go to the data scientist and say, can you tell me, is that here's a thing, tell me if this is real or if this is someone.
Right,
If we're getting a lot of feedback, and then a lot of what I do is going beyond what people are complaining about, because often people will say, my favorite example that I use is League of Legends. Everyone's we hate Set, nerf Set. Set's terrible. We hate Set. He's OP. And then you start to realize, well, it's only one group of people who are saying Set's OP. Are they all assassins? Well, maybe actually Set isn't overpowered. Maybe he's just got a skill set that's exploiting how underpowered assassins are right now. So now I have to go like and not solve nerfing Set doesn't actually fix that assassins are underpowered, and assassin players are going to be unhappy no matter what we do until we recognize that there's a gap there.
Right. So
So
I can see the inherent like financial value in this, because I think about like all of the times when I've seen a negative comment about my game and immediately rushed into development, which is time, which is money, and on a larger team with a larger scale that can be exponentially more expensive.
right.
Um,
And we also like if you let your community manager, if you have one with a lot of understanding and a lot of experience. I actually have the great privilege of working like with or have been able to work with like our marketing teams or our
mhm.
PR teams. And they'd say, hey, we're planning, this event. Or they'll even say, we need to come up with a campaign idea to boost subscription sales. And PR and marketing people are good at their job, but they don't know the community the way your community manager does it. They're in that
Mhm.
trench every single day, living and breathing it. You might have a really cool idea, but oh, did you know that the whole community is really mad about this thing? And therefore, if you do that, they're going to associate it with that, and this is not going to be as successful. And these weird little niche connections that you would never make and you know how you see a bad social media post, a bad take,
Mhm.
and everyone's like, oh, the intern did that. That was not an intern. That was someone high up in the company who said, we're going to do this. And a community or social media manager said, if you do this, it's going to be really bad. And they said, no, it's going to be fine. And they did it anyway. Promise you every single time.
Interesting, because that was where I was going to head with my next question. Actually, is because I mean, if so, like I presume there's a community manager at every major studio these days, or pretty much every major studio. Um, Yet it seems like in the gaming news discourse, we can't go like 3 days without some massive community PR fiasco. And so if community managers are providing this service, like so you're suggesting that it is just they don't get listened to in the before the decision is made.
I often joke that community managers and social media managers are the last people to know anything.
Okay.
Um,
From the
and
company down.
right,
Right.
we're the
Okay.
first to hear it. Like seen I have been in a situation where people have come to me and said, this feature launched and it's broken. And I'm like, we haven't launched that feature. And they're like, yes, we've launched. Like, they're like, look, here, it's out. And they point me to it and I go to it and it's out. And no one's told me. And I'm
Right.
like, I go to the dev. I'm like, this is out. Like, we have no documentation on it. Like, we don't have a knowledge base. Like, what are we? And they're like, oh, well, it's just a small thing. It's not a small thing. Everyone uses it. So, and this is not to say every company, and it's not to say every community manager feels this way. But community managers and social media managers are by and large, like, I'm going to get potentially a little controversial in here, but hear me out before you get like,
Okay.
this is generally a soft skill job.
Mm-hmm.
And soft skill jobs are usually more difficult to like grade on how important or good are they, right? We also tend to be women
Ah.
because often women fill in the
Right.
roles of soft skill jobs. And because we are women who are generally underrepresented and not always listened to, we rarely have solid data ourselves. We have to go to a data scientist or like do a lot of research to try to back this up. So if we come and we say like, hey, there's potentially a problem, you know, I've had many times where they're like, well, it's going to take us this amount of time of coding to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it takes you like you just have to click a template reply in customer service to send people away.
Right.
But what they don't understand is that it becomes a loop. So it's very easy for community managers to also just be like, if I ask, I'm going to bother them. They're going to write me off. Everyone's working really hard. It's not that much more work for me to do this. And so a lot of times they just kind of internally try and fix everything themselves, and then problems pile up. And
Right.
then by the time something's addressed, it's like, oh, this has gone really off the rails. Why wasn't this brought up earlier?
Right. I mean, the gist I'm getting, aside from the um, uh, systemic disregard, is that sometimes it can come to an like that horrible Fight Club equation where it's what is the cost of writing off somebody's life in an insurance policy versus a car recall, right?
Right.
Is the cost of losing these angry customers worth the cost of the development time required to update or fix or change things?
So yeah, if you're going to, like, my advice would be, if you're going to invest in a community manager, because I understand, especially with smaller dev, it's really hard to
Mm-hmm.
find that money. And again, it's a soft skill thing. How much can community management and marketing really mean? Um, Invest, like, really talk to someone and really get a feel for someone who kind of gets your kind of community.
Mm-hmm.
Because the best community manager for esports is probably not going to be the best community manager for a wholesome RPG Maker game.
Right, 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 right.
Different person, same skill set, different personality match. Get them as soon as you can, like as early as you can afford it, because especially if you get the one thing to understand, social media is about marketing and bringing in new people, spreading awareness. Community management is about retention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
both are really important, and they're slightly different skill sets. So again, you're probably finding a combo, but the earlier you can start establishing that, the more you're going to know about your community, the more you're going to figure out what works. If you can't afford them, um, start budgeting out an hour or two of your week every single week to, like, what graphic do I need to promote? I need to, where is it best to share this? Where do I get the best results from? Because that is actually what your community manager is going to be doing. And if you don't start marketing early, it's really hard to market late,
Right.
really hard to get traction late. Um, and keep in mind that your community manager is going to be the first person that your community talks to 99% of the time. And while it might be your game, it's their face. So find someone whose energy you like and matches and has your same values. Because if that doesn't match, I know a
Yeah.
lot of people who hired the most active person in their community and they were kind of a shit poster, right? They were kind of a
Right.
troll, or they were the best at the game, and then they just started this really competitive environment that very quickly went toxic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That the idea of handing that over an auteur of sorts, that is terrifying. To have anybody else, like, I've been front and center with our company and our games for so long
Mm-hmm.
that I can't imagine anybody else taking over that. Um, being responsible for the image and the projection and the answers and everything. And I mean, like, I thankfully have had the time to put aside for scheduling tweets and
Mm-hmm.
spreading and doing newsletters and blah 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 blah. It is a lot of work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
is there a scale of indie dev, probably, that you don't think necessarily needs a community manager, or is it, like you said at the top, every project needs some sort of community management?
So long as you can set aside time to do that sort of work yourself, you probably don't need it. But
Mm-hmm.
again, you you are going to be doing yourself a real value by finding someone who really understands how to talk to communities, and how to talk to communities that you usually can't. Because yes, when you've built a game and it's a small, like, you've got a small following, those people know you, they like
Mm-hmm.
you, they speak your language. But there's a whole world out there who communicates differently than you.
Right.
And a good community manager can speak all these different languages. They can meme one day and shitpost the next, and, like, be wholesome the next, and, like, really read the space. And community managers are really good at seeing around the corner.
Mm.
Um, and so having, we expect, we know there's a big thing that's probably going to happen soon around a AAA game. So let's have a meme set up with one of these three games, and then it's just there. And then when something happens to one of these three games, we pull the trigger and it's up, and then you suddenly get a big spike in eyes and engagement, and then they know how to riff off of that with the community, and it's a really good thing. But it also, again, we're very, very soft skill. So if you're spending a lot of time putting together knowledge bases or tutorials, sometimes it really helps to have a very soft skill communicative, fluffy, feely person to go through and be like, hey, this tutorial is really good. It's kind of dense. Can I put in some memes? Can I soften it and figure out like the flow? How do people consume information? Not just like read it. How do people consume and learn? And that makes a big difference too.
With that level of perception and intentionality with, creating the content and everything, how do you retain authenticity?
Again, an ideal world, like you said, it's hard to hand this over to someone, right? This is a control thing and you're letting someone else represent you. Like, have a good relationship with your community manager. If you two jive, that's great. Don't just put them in a corner and say, okay, make with the funny stuff, right? Talk to them, because they're going to be just as invested in this product as you are, because they're out there talking to people about it every single day and getting excited for it and watching people get excited and hearing people request things, knowing that it's already being built, right? That's so cool. How do you keep it authentic? Again, find someone who really cares about your product. When it comes to, so a good trick that I have for, specifically for social media, if you're trying to figure out, how do I keep a voice that sounds consistent and matches the feel of everything? And this is a good trick if you're running your own social media too. Figure out a character who kind of represents your company. Cartoon characters are often great, but just figure out like who does my company talk like? Am I more of a Mario, haha, I'm here and I do the thing? Am I more of a Sonic the Hedgehog, kind of snarky, moves fast? And when you're writing out your tweets, when you're writing out your stuff, would this character say that? Does that sound right in this character's voice in my head?
Interesting.
And it makes it much easier to keep kind of that consistent tone, and then to feel when something, because when something is just off, you know it, and you might not know why. So if you can figure out like, okay, we actually, we speak more like, I'm drawing a blank, I can't even pull up other characters right now. But if we're like a Bugs Bunny who's going to be quiet most of the time and then pop up with some, we're just going to, our shit posting is, we're going to pop up and reply to other people when they do something shady. Don't do this. It's a really bad thing, right? But Bugs Bunny, if he'd wait till someone had a really bad take and then he'd quote tweet it and be like, what's up, Doc? With the eyeball emoji, right? That's a Bugs Bunny. You know exactly what this person's about. They might be good-hearted, but they're going to call other people on their stuff.
Right. I'm not to disparage the profession or anything, but like I'm suddenly feeling like this is a big wall between, like, I like following indie devs because it's just them, right? Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people like. If there's a character, it's me, or it's any indie dev I'm following, and I treasure not having that wall. So how do we community manage without building any wall?
So it's easier to communicate as yourself with no wall if you are not a woman or a person of color or a queer person in the space, because you actually can start getting a lot of backlash very quickly, and in that case the wall can be very, very useful. But outside of that, if you find you reach the point where you've got too much going on and you can't, not even that you can't do all of you can't do it at all, but you can't do all of it, right? You need your social channels to be maintained, but you're working on multiple projects and you just can't do it all, right? You need to be able to quickly and clearly communicate to someone how. It's less about sounding like a character. That's a shortcut. It's more about, what are your values? So from very, very early on, I would encourage everyone to sit down and really write out, what are my values? Are my values, inclusivity, or is my value being the best? Are my values, we challenge people to be their best and rise to the occasion, or are we more laid back and let's get cozy and comfortable? And yes, it can change a little bit from day to day, but you kind of know what's really important to you at your core. And even think bigger than you currently are, because sooner or later ideally, you're going to be successful and you're going to need someone to help you. And you're going to need a way to be able to say, this is what's really important to me, to my company, to my game, to my everything. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to empower your community manager to do what you want done and do it in the right way.
Right.
Because if you can't verb it, how can someone else enact it?
Right.
And that can be a project you work with your community manager. Again, I talked a lot about keeping a consistent tone. That's more of a branding thing when you're on Twitter. But it's important to know what's important to you. And a lot of times you think you know it, but then when you have to sit down, write me down 5 things that you and your games and are the pillars for everything that you do. What are the 5? They don't have to be the uniting thing, but like the thing, they don't have to be present in every single game. But what are the 5 things that are really important to you, that are core to your company, to your brand, to your... It's actually hard. It's a really hard exercise. Part of what community managers do is they take those and they take your game and they try to combine them and then put them out in a way that people who are like-minded will join. Because the other thing that we have not discussed is communities have a tendency to go toxic. I don't know if you've noticed this. And
Just in every
community...
competitive game I've ever played, no.
Non-competitive ones too.
Right.
Trust me. Community, I like to say community is a verb. You can't, if you build a space and you leave it alone, that's not a community, that's a server. And that's fine. But community, I consider it like gardening. And I talk about every so often I got to prune people. And I don't care if they're the person who's been here the longest. If they are not representing what we want, they are representing your game. If they're a big voice in your community and you're letting them get away with being a jerk, if you're letting them, and I'm not even talking about one of the big crimes, right? I'm not talking about being sexist or racist. I'm just talking about anytime someone posts, they're like, you're in the wrong channel, dillweed. Why don't you read the rules? God, why are you asking stupid questions all the time? That's a reflection on you.
Right.
So I think I've wandered off of the point a little bit.
Yeah, I don't remember
but
what we said.
I do this sometimes. I'm a soft skill person.
No, it's good. Because I mean, like we've been very fortunate with our community, especially the community we've gathered here on Twitch and has extended into our Discord server, that everybody's been really cool. We're not that big, but everybody's been really, really cool. We haven't had, like, all of our moderation instances have been random people just showing up in the server and then bombarding it with 1,000 hey everyone's or whatever. I hate that part. I hate policing. I hate moderation to an extent where I feel really grateful that the community is being so cool, because if it required more heavy moderation, I probably would not have the server anymore. And that's one part of I guess handing that off to a community manager is something that I'd like, but man, that's still, I just hate the rules.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, ideally, and even if you're small, I know a lot of community managers who, especially when they're early on in their career and they're still like building themselves up, they work contract part-time with several different smaller games. And so they're working on 4 or 5 different games, pulling up social media here. They've found, a couple volunteer moderators in each forum or in each Discord and have promoted them and are coaching them. Also, shout out to all of the volunteer moderators on Twitch and Discord. All of you are amazing. We couldn't do our jobs without you. We love you. But yeah, like, community managers can take a lot of the load off, but also remember that they do handle a lot of different spaces, right? We juggle a lot of things. And that's part of why it's really important, especially when, like, you are super attached to everything you do. Find someone that you click with, find someone you jive with, and talk with them and make sure everyone's on the same page, because there's nothing worse than like finding out that someone's being a jerk behind your back. And it's even worse when it's your brand.
Right. Now, if we're going to talk a bit about like the potential financial benefits of effective community management, do you think a community manager, through their efforts, brings in revenue to a studio worth their weight, so to speak?
The answer is yes, but not necessarily in the way that you think. You're not going to hire a community manager and see a 4,000% bump in. Right. I know. It's hard. This is the hard truth of it. I said this a little bit before. Social media management is it's a little bit about retention, but it's mostly about engagement and bringing people in. And social media, I'm not going to lie, social media is a crapshoot. Right. Every post could make it big and it might not. And the algorithms are literally set up to reward you once and then not reward you for another really long time, so that you'll keep pushing the button and hope that the treat will come out. Because that's just how they're programmed. You can be smart about it. You can do certain things to bump your engagement, to make sure things are seen more. And that will bring in more players, right? That'll put more eyeballs on it. That, however, has to be done in succession with a good onboarding process. Because no matter how good your social media is, if the onboarding process sucks, people aren't going to stick it through.
And what do you mean by onboarding process?
How they get into the game. How difficult is it to download it? How difficult it is to get into the game? Does it crash 4 times? Does it have a tutorial? Can I figure out how to even start playing? Does the A button like open inventory instead of jumping or grabbing something? Well, now I'm just confused. I'm out, right? You need to kind of train people in how to play your game. Community management is actually more about retention than it is about acquisition, and that's kind of the hard truth that a lot of people don't understand. But as I said, community managers save you a lot of money in that they come up with the events that are going to smaller indie, so not in the same way, but like in bigger companies, we come up with the events that are going to draw in subscriptions, right? Community managers are really good at figuring out, hey, there's, international whatever BS internet holiday is coming up, and it's about butterflies, and we have a butterfly in our game. So let's do a sale this day, 5% off for Butterfly Day. Things that you probably don't even know about. They'll find these cool little ideas to bring it in. They'll save you dev time in that they're hopefully, if they're good at their job, going to be able to recognize when someone's yelling because there's a problem, when they're yelling because they're just mad, or if they're yelling about A when actually the problem is B, and help you sort through all of that. And again, they deal with the problem people and highlight the good people.
Right.
So if they're bringing the problem makers out of your community, if they're highlighting the people who are really great, who are positive, who are helping people, giving them moderator positions, featuring their fan art. By featuring fan art, that's going to hit the social media, which then is hopefully anyone who likes that artist is going to be like, oh, I haven't heard of this. I literally have downloaded games because I'm like, that person.
Right.
I like them. They drew fan. I was actually part of the Overwatch influencer manager launch campaign, where we did 21 days of Overwatch, and we had a fan artist do a portrait of every single one of the heroes in Overwatch and launch them one by one. And it was like written up in Forbes magazine as just a wild success. And fan art is a really, really powerful tool to be like, someone that I like cared enough to create this for this game, so therefore it must be good. And even if you don't know the artist, that's really good artwork. What's that from? Oh, maybe that game is my style.
So if community management is about retention, I make games that don't have loot boxes, they don't have subscriptions. Once somebody's bought my game, there's probably not very much I can gain off of keeping them around, for lack of a better way of phrasing it. Why would I care about retention? Because
you didn't say, well, you did say, but you didn't mean it. You said game, but you meant games. your community manager is going to be marketing your company and all your games.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you know, especially with smaller games, you're like, oh, that game looks cool, and then you never hear of it again, right? And your community manager is going to start building those dots between like, oh, this company made this game and now they're doing a Kickstarter, right? You liked this game, go to this Kickstarter. Or you liked this game, oh, this is by the same people who did this. Or oh, this was this character was designed by this artist whom you love. So therefore, you should check out this new game, even though it has nothing to do with anything else you've ever played. You do have retention. You want people to remember your studio, to remember your games, so they will come back and support you again, because then you're not having to bring in new users. You're just selling something new to a user who's already a fan of you. And if they can keep your Discord alive and excited about your products, you're ahead.
So, yes, I agree with all of that. It was a funky question. The interesting thing. So we've had a big transition in the kind of games that we're making, to the point where our first fans, who we've retained for this length of time, are not really the target demographic for what we're making now. How does retention, if they're not going to be crossing over into the new game, or that audience is not going to be necessarily recognizing the new game as anything similar, what does retention do for us then?
Well, so this is where I'm going to flip this a little bit and say you are doing indie. This is smaller, so you're probably not going to be having a community manager and a social media manager. You're going to be having both.
It's me.
Right. You're going to be finding someone who's going to do community and probably some customer service as well as social media. And if we were talking about AAA, which is what I'm currently in, that's a different conversation. I'm working on a game that's a new IP. It's a very different creature. And in that case, like they brought me on even before the game was announced so that I could know it really well and I could start planning on how we were going to engage and build this community.
Right.
So what's your community manager going to do for you now with something new? They're going to start building a foundation of how do we talk about this new game? How do we talk about this new style that we've embraced? Who's interested in that? Because one of the most important things that you need to be able to do is be able to talk about not just what your game isn't, but exactly what it is, right? Use the exact phrase if people are like, I'm tired of X and Y in my game. I want Q and R. It's like, oh, great, cool. Here's our game. It's got Q and R. And they're like, how did you know? I read all of your Steam reviews and you said, these are the things you want and the things you don't want.
Right.
But you're also going to be pulling in someone who's going to be doing social media and community. And again, so their social media, they're going to be figuring out, how do we talk about this? How do we market it? Who is in, our old style, was, let's just say, our old style was more shooter, right? And we use these kind of graphics. But now we're pivoting to something that's more RPG inspired. So we're probably going to want a lighter tone to our graphics. We're going to be reaching these people. What are kind of the demographics? What are the age? Not just of our target audience, but of like that Venn diagram that's around. And it's really that Venn diagram. Here's the exact person I want to play my game. But it's going to cross over in all these other things. And how do I reach all these people so that, yes, we are talking directly to these people, but in such a way that it starts pinging these other people who are further out of that circle, but still have an interest, so they'll come in and try it.
Right. Does it ever, I mean, you can only cater to so many groups over the course, right? And if you are having this, studio that's transitioning from Doom to Animal Crossing,
right?
As a community manager, is there at some point where you decide to stop focusing on a previous group or through that transition, and what does that watershed moment look like? What is the defining when
So it's something that you definitely need to talk to your product owner or the your devs with, because I would say that is not a decision that a community manager should make in a vacuum.
Right.
Community manager might say, I think we should do this, but you should be guiding. This is a collaborative. Again, don't just say sit in the corner and make the funny stuff. But Doom to Animal Crossing is actually a really great example because we saw the crossover that happened there. Like, Doom Crossing was the best thing in the early part of the pandemic, and I still have the Eternal Horizons fan song stuck in my head, like right now. But like, for an example, I worked at Red Bull, and we were trying to figure out some stuff to do to attract more casual gamers. And we knew we had a lot of people who were super interested in Smash. And I spent a lot of time saying we actually should target Animal Crossing for the release because we know that Isabelle is one of the most popular. And you know what? Maybe those players won't go out and buy Animal Crossing, but they're going to be entertained with the content because they like that character. They see the connection, right? It's not completely out of left field. And a good community manager can start telling you, like, okay, yes, we need to transition away from this, but we can do a happy send-off, right? We can do kind of a handshake moment. And again, they're going to be sitting down with all the metrics from your social media and saying, like, okay, so actually we thought that we thought that the Doom fans would not want to engage with our Animal Crossing content at all, but the metrics show that that group are actually still engaging with it. So maybe we don't move away from it. That's something that's so...
Right.
It's so soft skill.
Right.
So...
That's a very like best case scenario though, where things are good.
Well,
but like, what happens when the data says that no, they absolutely hate what you're doing now?
Right, and that's the community manager's job, is to sit down and look at the data and say, like, okay, this isn't working. I suggest we try these two things and see if we can branch out and reach to these people. And maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. And that's one of the things that I actually really love about my job, is I'm given a lot of permission to fail, because I'm not failing in that I'm not getting canceled, right? I'm not doing anything bad. It's just, I'm going to try something weird. Okay, try the weird thing. I do the weird thing. Okay, that didn't work. I'm going to do this other weird thing. Like, it's not the same weird thing. I'm doing something different, and I'm testing what happens if I post it in the morning versus what happens if I post it in the evening versus what happens when I post it. This particular format actually did really well on Twitter, but it's not doing well on Reddit. So what if I take the Twitter post and instead of directly posting it to Reddit, I change it and try this? Oh, that took off. So now I know I have to do Twitter this way and Reddit this way to get the optimal engagement from both. Like, the answer is, like, I can't tell you exactly what they would do because it's different every single time.
Right. The I mean, speaking of Twitter and Reddit, and this might be a question more for a social media manager, but like, I often feel that all we're doing in terms of our community outreach is speaking to this slowly increasing echo chamber. How do you suggest indies, small companies, gain genuine outreach to the... I mean, there's a lot... The community that's into our game and most of indie studios games is a lot larger than the active community that follows them on Twitter or,
right,
in their Discord or whatever.
So how do you convert view count into actual engagement? And that is the million-dollar question that everyone is hiring everyone to try and figure out, and promoting, paying for studies, and it's a good question. I wish I had a solid answer for you. But how do you get out of the echo chamber? Well, you have to experiment and you have to do weird things. That's what I said. Like, a lot of the time, I love my job because I'm given permission to fail. Because I can say, like, hey, I'm going to try this thing. It's not going to reflect badly on our company. It just might not get a lot of engagement. Don't punish a community manager or a social media manager for doing something that didn't work, because now you know that doesn't work.
Right.
So, yeah. So I think I'm going to flip over to mobile games here for a moment, just because it's such a solid example of, you think mobile games are cheap to make, they make a lot of money, mobile games are easy. It takes $10 in advertising to convert one user, to get them to download your game and spend money in your game. It takes $10 of advertising.
Right.
So it's not easy to bring in people, and you really do have to find ways to break the mold, to reach new audiences. And that's part of why I say it's so important for you to establish early on what is your community, what are your values, be able to communicate those to a community manager, because that way then they have a really solid tool set to say, I'm going to try X, Y, and Z. I'm doing these things because this is what our game is. These are what our values are. These are the people we're targeting. All of these things line up. We're going to see if any of these 3 things work. Okay, so X didn't work at all. Y and Z, Y did really well. Z not so much. We're going to continue Y. Now I'm going to alter Z and see if I can get a better one off of Z. And then I'm going to turn around and start thinking about a new plan for A. And there's constant experimentation and constant, like, does this work? Does this not? And that's what we do.
Right. Do you work alone as a community manager? Are you the only community manager on your team?
At Red Bull, I was the only community manager. At DeviantArt, there were, depending on the time, between 3 and I think 9 of us. Right now on Avalanche, at Contraband, I'm the only one, but that's because we're not out yet. We're gonna have a team once we get closer to launch. Like I said, for smaller studios, usually you can't afford to have a community manager 24/7. You know, it's not feasible for smaller budgets. So, like I said, there's a lot of people who will work on 2 or 3, 4, 5 games. Get you the content you need, run what you can. It's obviously not as great as having one dedicated person to just really dig and burrow into your game. But the people who do this are actually really good. They have a lot of understanding because they've worked on so many games. They already have a background. Like, that's part of the thing is you're not just paying for the community manager and what they're actively doing while you're there. You're paying for all their experience. It's like when you hire a dev, you're not hiring them to just code this thing. You're hiring them to come in and problem solve and have the information that they've already built up. So when you hire someone who's worked on 50 games, they're coming in with a lot of knowledge and can be pretty streamlined about all this.
Right. Actually, you mentioned Contraband, so you recently did a big, I guess, an E3 announcement. I'm curious from a community management perspective angle, what goes into prepping an announcement like that, and how do you as a community manager prepare the team for the onslaught of reactions and emotions and all that stuff?
So the first thing we kind of did was we really I've got to speak a little carefully about this.
No, I understand.
But we kind of considered worst case scenarios of what could people react negatively to, and at what point do we need to draw a line and step in. Now, we didn't announce, and then we are not talking about the game for a while. We can't wait. I can't wait to share more information with you all, but I can't right now. At some point we will. So that made it a lot easier. If you have an active Discord server, my friends at Ooglets dealt with this a little bit. They made an announcement about the Epic Store that didn't go over very well. You do kind of have to prepare a worst case scenario of like, how do I prepare? And in that case, I would be prepared like to flip the server to slow mode. So, people can't come in and spam and harass and all that. Really think about especially when you've got an established community, really think about the most vulnerable people in that community and how you can protect them. Because the most vulnerable people will be the ones that the trolls go after. They will also try to defend you the most, which is so wholesome, but also really bad for their mental health. And as a community manager, protecting your community is actually a really important part of it. And you really want the best for these people who care so much about, as a developer too, I'm sure you know. So you plan like worst case scenario. When do we step in? If misinformation is going out, how do we handle it? And a lot of that goes through like PR, but I worked with our PR to prep internal communications, the guidelines around what can you say, what can we not say, what's released, what's not released, use this term, don't use that term, all that sort of stuff. We planned the social media posts to go out. There was a lot of work prepping. We fortunately have relationships with Twitter and Discord, so we were able to get those pre-verified, which was a whole lot of work.
Right.
So when the announcement went up, we had the official, the check mark and all that. Which again, a lot of indies don't have that luxury. It's something you kind of have to work up to. But planning out, like, okay, if we are going to announce, right, we're announcing this thing, here's a big announcement. what are the rules specifically for the day of the announcement when the server's going to get flooded and everything's going to happen? Okay, cool. Then how many days are we going to keep it at that? Or at what point when it scales down, are we going to return it to normal mode? Because you make special exceptions for announce day. You want to allow people to spam emojis more than usual because they're excited and you want to encourage that excitement while also being really vigilant. So if someone's spamming a rude emoji, you shut them down very quickly. Planning not just the day of, but the week of and the month of and the year of, and then like, okay, like keeping track, you already start to plan about, okay, we're going to look at metrics. What tweet did well, who's our most active person, who's our most negative person, because often the job of community manager is to find your most negative naysayer, because it's kind of like, you remember when the original when the prequel Star Wars came out?
Yes.
And you could tell who was the biggest Star Wars fan by how much they hated the prequels. That love and hate, kind of that circle, they run like back here.
Right.
I often tell people, like, a negative reaction to a change isn't necessarily bad because it means they care. If you change something and no one says anything, that's a bad sign. So I spent a lot of my time as a community manager telling people, no, the anger's okay. The anger's okay. So you plan for that. You find the people who are the biggest naysayers who are reasonable. That's a whole skill in of itself. And then you work with them. Why are you upset? Well, how can we make it better? Well, okay, this is why we did it. And often those people will turn around and become your biggest proponents. And those are the people that you make VIPs in the server and you give early access to so that they'll start building hype for you. And yeah, you start working early with your dev team about like, hey, we're seeing a really big, the social media stats are coming in. And we're actually seeing more women reacting to this than we thought. So what can we do to make sure that this game is actually skewed a little bit more femme than it currently is? Because if, we're having all these women react and then, oh, we've only got one female character, maybe that's not going to go over very well. Maybe we should start. So I realized that was a very long-winded answer without a solid, but that's what I'm saying. Community management's like a lot of like... What do I do this day on this project to make this the best thing it can be?
So there's a lot of mentions in there about how to prep properly for negative reactions. Is there any prep you do in terms of amplifying positive reactions? How do you funnel those and channel those?
Not as easy as you would think. So especially when you're a bigger property, but actually one of the best tips that I have for you, and make sure not all community managers early in their career know to do this, ask before you retweet or repost fan art of your game, because sometimes marginalized creators actually don't want that attention that can come to them because negative reactions. Sometimes gamers are jerks. I love gamers. Sometimes gamers are jerks. You figure out, can we tweet this? Can we feature it in a newsletter? Can we work with this person? Oh, this person is making really, really awesome music. Well, using the music in the game is a problem because licensing and da-da-da-da. But can we ask permission to use their music to feature a stream of fan art, right? Figure out how you can amplify these voices. And again, a hard and solid do this and don't do this is really difficult because it depends on the game, it depends on the project, it depends on the creator. And that's, again, part of your community manager, hopefully, are going to know how to navigate that.
Do you ever, like, I've heard some really bizarre stories of great reaction during announcement and build up, leading to absolute catastrophe because the hype went to the head. Is there anything as a community manager you do to temper expectations?
So I have actually been in the very fortunate position in that I have been given permission to tell my devs what we can and can't say. But like a lot of it, you can say we're going to do X and gamers are going to say, oh, X means all of these things. And it's so easy in a vacuum. And when someone is talking to a gamer and they're like, oh, dev, this thing is broken and I hate it. The dev's like, oh, cool, I'll have it fixed in a week.
Right.
It never gets fixed in a week. But in that moment, like, oh yeah, that's a small thing. I'm seeing it now. I could answer it now, except I'm doing this Q&A, right? So when you're talking to the community, don't make promises, right? Don't promise we'll have this, we will have that. Be honest when things change. And even time, giving time, especially with the pandemic, we all know time zones get pushed back, right? We're going to have it out by this week. Well, now it'll be out next week. Well, now it's next month. Well, now we're planning a 2023 launch. Sorry. Actually, if you would like a really, really great example, and this is a long video, but there's a video by the internet historian called No Woman's Land.
Yep. Great video.
So good. And that's a great example of how like things went too far. And again, I talk about empowering your community manager, right? A good community manager would have been in there going like, please don't say that. We don't. And I don't know if they had a community manager in there, but I promise you, every time they said, oh yeah, it's going to have that. Oh yeah, it's going to have this. The community manager's like, "Ugh," because we're the ones who get yelled at. When it doesn't happen.
I mean, yes, it was a disaster in terms of community management and PR, but I mean, it was a very profitable.
It was and the cool thing is they turned it around.
Right.
They turned it into something really, really cool. Like that's it. It fills me with warm fuzzies.
It's an interesting paradox that for those who haven't seen the video, it's about No Man's Sky, because if I'll say untruths, not lies. The untruths were not present, the game would not have been as profitable as it was. If the game had not been as profitable as it was, they would not have had the additional money to spend on development time to deliver the things that they had untruthed about. So
again, I go so far as to say I don't think a lot of those untruths were done in any kind of I'm deceiving people.
Right.
It's just people didn't know their scope, right?
Right.
Things got out of scope real quick, and yeah, we can do that. And well, okay, yes, we said it was going to do that, but we said that like 3 years ago. Is anyone really going to remember? Oh crap, they remember. You better go add that in.
Right.
Oh, what, you mean we can't add that in?
Yeah, it's a challenge.
It's a really interesting situation, and it happens a lot, and scope creep is super easy, especially when you have, a publisher who you've made promises to, and now you got to pony up and try and deliver.
Right. Good lessons all around, though. If somebody is interested in pursuing community management as a career path, what do they do today?
Best thing you can do is find a community and start getting involved. Find a Discord you really like. Start looking at who are the moderators, how do they treat people. Volunteer to moderate someone's Twitch stream. I always joke, if you want to be a community manager and you're trying to impress me, let me know that you've run a D&D campaign, you've DM'd a D&D campaign for 2 or more years, because then you can handle scheduling, you can handle conflict, you could be creative. Like, that's kind of my running thing. It's really about, if you're a community manager, you really want to be a community manager. You are here, you want to help people, you want to stop the bad guys, you want to make things clear, and you want to, I always say I'm a professional cheerleader. You really get excited about the work of your colleagues. So that's the best thing you can do, is start just finding places to volunteer, moderate a chat room, moderate a Discord, moderate a Twitch stream, and then start looking for, there's entry-level community managers everywhere, social media managers everywhere. Doesn't pay well at the start. It's a lot of gather some experience, and then you'll figure out at some time, like someone will do something, you're like, I know how to fix that. And you're like, oh, I can go ask for more money now because I know how to fix that.
Right. So let's say I've been volunteering and engaging in communities and moderating everything. How do I know if I'm actually good at this?
Well, okay, so the answer is you don't. I don't know a single community manager who does not have imposter syndrome, myself included.
Right.
I had someone ask me to be a mentor, and I'm like, why would I don't know anything? I've been in this industry 15 years. Yeah, I do know something. Like, why is that my reaction? We tend to all feel that way. But you get to a point where, like, you're like, okay, I've gone in, I've checked my stuff, like I've got a checklist, I know how to be productive and I know how to make this good, and oh, I've blown through my checklist. Like, pursue it and do it. And my advice, and this is true in anything when you're applying for jobs anywhere in game dev, don't wait until you feel like you're ready. When you feel like you've got a grasp and you're maybe like, you can't level up by constantly doing the same level.
Right.
So get to a point where you're like, I'm comfortable-ish, and then go higher. Especially if you're a woman or a minority. We chronically under-apply to things because we're afraid we don't tick every single box. If you tick all but 2 or 3 boxes, please go apply to that job. You can do it.
Right. Oh, that's good advice. As we come to a conclusion here, is there anything that you would like people to take a look at or check out, or anything you want to direct people to?
If you are a nerd for tabletop, I stream tabletop at Gaming Trend, and I'm about to hopefully the beginning of September be running a small person D&D 5e horror stream.
Exciting.
Very character based, should be super fun. And yeah, get excited for Contraband. I can't wait to tell you more about it.
Yes, I'm. It's taking a lot of effort not to barrage you with focused questions on that.
I would tell you more if I could.
Right. Yeah, so I guess I want to thank you very much for coming on and talking to us all about community management. It's a side. I mean, I do a lot of the things that I think I should be doing, but it's not. I gotta wear a lot of hats, and it's not something I'm very focused on.
And it's so difficult to. There's no like community manager curriculum, and there's no one way to do it, and there's no right or wrong way, which makes it really difficult. But if you find yourself really stuck in a situation, please reach out. I'll be happy to help as much as I can. Obviously, I'm dual wielding careers as both a gaming journalist and a community manager, but I'm here. I'll help as much as I can, and I know lots of community managers who are always looking for gigs, so help where I can.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, and I guess, guys, we'll sign off for now. I don't know where I'm going to send you, but see you tomorrow. We're back. Do more work tomorrow. Bye, guys.